beyond the thunder and lightning, past the clouds, over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star. Opened the earth, walking with blood-soaked feet. She challenged the whip, the gun, the knife. She challenged the fire, pulled from the bodies of slaves, made into laws, prisons, and courts. Screaming white-hot flames and agony, she challenged millions of headhunters, dragging and ripping apart impossible tender moments of time, shipping vessels of history, ancient history, destroying the fabric, the godlike claw of
Greetings and welcome back as always. Thank you all so much for joining us today. President Trump says that U.S. forces have seized an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela in the Trump administration's latest escalation. Is this really a move of militarism, or does this just validate what we've known all along, that it's really all about oil? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each episode, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into current events and the broader historical context in which most of these events take place. Let's quickly look at some of today's headlines. This story just broke around about 2 hours ago. Judge orders immediate release of Kilmar Abrego Garcia from immigration detention. A federal judge has ordered the immediate release of him. Judge Paula Zinnes said in her order today that, quote, since Abrego Garcia's wrongful detention in El Salvador, he has been redetained again without lawful authority, end quote. She said the absence of a removal order prevents the government from removing Abrego Garcia from the United States. My question there would simply be, what took this so long? We've known this reality ever since the Trump administration decided to pick this fight. So with that, why did we have to go through this number of judges? Why did we have to go through so many days, so many months, and so much back and forth to get to this point? That's more rhetorical than anything else. The Washington Post poses the question today how a U.S. admiral decided to kill 2 boat strike survivors. The controversial order given by Admiral Frank Bradley is under scrutiny from Congress inside the most consequential deliberation of his career. And again, I said in October when Admiral Halsey sent his letter of resignation to Pete Hegseth that Halsey saw on the horizon, the writing was on the wall, that they were going to try to pass the buck to him. And now you see that Admiral Bradley, this has become his decision. And what we know from this is that there are really 2 chains of command here. You have Admiral Halsey on the conventional side of the military, and you have Bradley on the special operations side. And the special operations side has been working in concert with the CIA and other national security entities as a way of protecting those security entities from exposure. And it also, in turn, protects the special operations side from exposure as well. But at the end of the day, as much as we're focusing on the 2 victims of the double tap in September, we're now up to 84 cases of murder. Again, the United States has stepped up its campaign against Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, seizing a tanker off Venezuela. And it's important to understand that the United States has absolutely no legal basis in terms of international law or in terms of American law to seize the property of a sovereign nation such as Venezuela. The fact that the United States has issued sanctions, that's totally irrelevant here. The United States is not the world police. So just because Donald Trump says we're sanctioning Iran from buying oil against or from Venezuela, that's just his opinion. That doesn't mean anything internationally. So we're going to have to wait and see what this act of war or what the result is from this act of war. And finally, Nobel Peace Prize winner María Corina Machado actually received her award yesterday in Switzerland. And there was all of this supposed, I don't know what you want to call it, confusion because she got to the Nobel Prize award ceremony late. Some were wondering whether or not she had been detained, whether or not something had happened to her in Venezuela. And one of the reports that I heard on National Public Radio, they were saying that she's been living in secret in Venezuela. Well, if President Maduro is the dictator that they claim he is, if President Maduro is the strong man that they claim he is, then how would she be able to live in Venezuela in hiding for as long as she's been there? I think that's a contrived story. I think this was really drama for the sake of drama, and we'll get into more of that a little later. So with all of that, the issue before us is that the Trump administration has seized an oil tanker off of the coast of Venezuela. U.S. officials told CBS News that the seizure involved 10 members of the U.S. Coast Guard, 10 U.S. Marines, and Special Operations Forces. Other reports said that the tanker, named the skipper, departed Venezuela and was on its way to Cuba when it was boarded by U.S. forces. Others, Pam Bondi said that the tanker was used to transport sanctioned oil from Venezuela to Iran. Well, whether it was floating to Iran or to the moon, who gives a damn? Because what are U.S. sanctions other than a whole bunch of nothing? With that being said, let's turn to my guest. He's a leader of the Organization for the Victory of the People based in Guyana. He's an executive member of the Caribbean chapter of the Network for the Defense of Humanity and the Caribbean Pan-African Network. He is none other than my dear brother, Gerald Perreira. Gerald, as always, welcome back.
Yeah. Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with this most recent story of this seizure of the oil tanker. We know how it's being reported here in the West. How is all of this being reported there in the region? Is this being seen as a pretext to war, or is this just being seen as another reckless act by the Trump administration?
Both. It is seen as a reckless act by the Trump administration, and we're looking at the situation seriously because, Trump is quite an unpredictable person. So, we are quite cautious in terms of, one, it definitely is a reckless act. What they did is illegal under international law. And we can see that there are actually signs that they're preparing for war. The tanker was seized in an area that the waters belong to Venezuela. And the Americans are claiming that the ship, that the tanker that was seized was flying the flag of Guyana. This is what they said.
Okay.
It was, flying the flag of Guyana. Now, what's interesting is 3 days before the issue with the tanker, Alistair Rutledge, the CEO for ExxonMobil in Guyana, he said that ExxonMobil is here to stay in Guyana and it's not going anywhere. And I found that, a number of us, we found that extremely offensive. That's a sort of an insult to our independence, our dignity, and our sovereignty. Whatever's left of those noble principles on paper. And then you had this issue with the U.S. seizing this vessel, maybe carrying oil to Cuba. But yesterday, just after the ship was captured, yesterday in the evening, I was driving along Nelson Mandela's Avenue when I saw a fleet of vehicles from the U.S. Embassy, followed by a big bus with American personnel. So they came into Guyana, and there was a meeting with the president of Guyana, Orphan Ali, U.S. war officials, headed by the senior advisor to the Secretary of War, Patrick Weaver, and by the acting Assistant Secretary, Joseph Humara. He was here.
Mm-hmm.
And they met with the National Security Advisor, the President of Guyana. They met with the President, the Secretary, Foreign Secretary, as well as the Minister of Foreign Affairs and so on. And the U.S. Ambassador was there. And it was interesting. They said that they're focusing on the border security, that's with Guyana and Venezuela, and regional stability. Now, here is the United States, a rogue state that is actually destabilizing the region. And then they are here in Guyana to tell us about regional stability. And our misleaders sit there and do not ask any questions whatsoever. None of the mainstream political parties have said anything. Because to put it in a nutshell, my brother, and for your audience, every one of the political parties in Guyana and their leaders we have a saying, we have a saying that they're afraid of white people. They're just scared of white people. And by white people, I mean the United States government, the American ambassador in Guyana, the European Union, the Canadian embassy, as well as the British. I've pointed out on a number of occasions, when you listen to the diplomats, the representative of the ABC, what they call the ABC/EU countries, when you listen to their diplomats speak, you will believe that Guyana is a colony. They speak, they address us as though we are still in the period of colonization. And they talk to us in very condescending and racist way. And our misleaders just go along with it. Mm-hmm. Only us in the Organization for the Victory of the People call them out for what they are. And you imagine, that they're driving down an avenue named after Nelson Mandela. The same people who, up to the time when Nelson Mandela was president, was still on the US list. They still had him listed as a terrorist. And these who are claiming that they're here to offer freedom, we know, opposed the ANC and wanted Mandela to remain in prison. So that is it, what we have here. And we are saying, I believe there are two things can happen. It's either Trump is trying to put pressure, so he's hoping that Maduro would give in, or that the military would revolt against the regime, against Maduro, and that the masses, the people, take to the streets in the hundreds of thousands. Well, let me tell you this. I was invited to a gathering. There's a huge gathering of anti-imperialist forces in Caracas as I speak. Over 2,000 delegates were expected. And I think the Americans got wink of this thing and decided, that's when Trump came out and said that any aircraft flying to Venezuela, when he issued a no-fly zone, unilaterally said this is a no-fly zone, and he's sending a warning to traffickers and pirates and anybody going. Well, I accepted the invitation to go. And I traveled out, but there was a problem. I had a chartered flight waiting in Barbados to fly straight into Caracas. But there were some complications that I got to, because I said, I am going. If Trump is going to shoot down the plane, let him shoot it down. Okay? So I got to Barbados, but there were some problems that we had in terms of the chartered left, and so I had to return. But a number of people were stranded because they put pressure on various airlines not to go into Caracas. And Caracas retaliated by terminating the landing rights of a number of airlines. But there are those who are going in. So I missed out on that gathering. But I was invited as well. Great. I was invited as well. And you see where I'm sitting. Yes. Yes. Well, I saw that they prevented some activists from leaving the United States to attend that conference. But the thing is, I know from the ground and from others who have attended those gatherings, and you can see it, there are hundreds of thousands of people who turned up for in the armed battalions, the communal, to defend the various communities. And you should see the amount of volunteers. There was a huge rally in downtown Caracas that drew hundreds of thousands. It was huge. And the Venezuelan economy is in upswing. It has taken off. There's a lot of improvement. And what they're not telling you is that many Venezuelans who are basically economic refugees, not that they're opposed to the Maduro. Correct. They're economic refugees, and many of them are returning to Venezuela. And I think Trump was surprised when they saw the mobilization and the thousands that are out there that are prepared to defend the Bolivarian revolution. So he's hoping that he thought that by putting pressure, you will get a revolt. That did not happen. So he's trying now to save face. But I think if he go down the road of actually attacking Venezuela, it's not going to be nice. It's going to backfire. It's going to ignite the region. It's going to affect Guyana. It's going to affect Trinidad. And once the war begins, it's going to put the Ali administration in Guyana and the Kamla Bisesa administration, Kamla Bisesa regime in Trinidad in a corner, because people are saying, these two leaders, Guyana and Trinidad, are prepared to act as they're actually satellites of the empire. And Errol Barrow, the prime minister, who's an anti-imperialist champion from the first prime minister of Barbados, independent Barbados, he said, in Barbados, we are friends to all and satellites of none. But now we have leaders who have violated the principles and the spirit of the Treaty of Chaguaramas, that the Caribbean and so will remain a zone of peace. And these people are prepared. The government in Trinidad and the government in Guyana are prepared to allow Guyana and Trinidad to be launching pad for acts of U.S. aggression against a sovereign nation state, Venezuela. It's going to backfire because I think the streets are going to hot up. And I believe, as Lenin said, that in cases of war, it can lead to uprising or revolution.
If I heard this correctly, I believe that President Trump has also, over the last day or two, threatened Colombian President Petro,
yes,
saying that he's going to be next, yes, and that he needs to pay attention because he's going to be next. And I could be reading this totally wrong, but I'm getting the sense that the more bluster that there is in Trump's rhetoric, the less likely he is to actually follow through on the threat. Your thoughts?
I agree with you, because I mentioned this before. The National Liberation Army, which was the second largest guerrilla group you had after the FARC, mm-hmm, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, and
in Colombia.
Yeah, mm-hmm, they are armed, heavily armed. They have an estimated roughly 8,000 to 10,000 fighters, and also
trained fighters,
real fighters, yes, real fighters. And also there is a faction that broke away from FARC after FARC decided to go into the electoral process. They mm-hmm. returned and they picked up their arms and they have gone back. So they've already announced that they're prepared to fight alongside to fight in defense of Venezuela, because they know it will be an attack on Venezuela, will be an attack on Colombia, and by extension we'll have to look in terms of what they're planning for Cuba and Nicaragua, because that is what Trump would like to do. But I agree with you. I think there is a dissension in the camp. I think senior military figures are not going along with Pete Hegseth and others. I think there is some disagreement, and I think they're trying to find some way to back out of this, because I saw that Chevron is entering into talks with Venezuela. They're talking to Trump so that they can operate in Venezuela. So I think there's a situation where Trump spoke with Maduro. Maduro acknowledged it. And I think they realized, well, we can't just go in there and take their oil. That's not going to happen. So we might as well work out something that they might be able to, the US will get something, and Venezuela will be able to get something to extend, because the country is under pressure, and that would be the way out.
Which takes me to, and this may be somewhat of a rhetorical question, but this takes me to, why do we have to go through all of this display of jingoism and all of this, when if they had just called Maduro in the first place, they probably could have wound up in the same position. This reminds me somewhat of what transpired with the United States and Osama bin not Osama bin Laden in Iraq, where I'm drawing a blank on his name now. Saddam Hussein, about 10 days before the United States went in, Saddam sent George Bush a letter saying, hey, man, I'll give you what you want, just don't invade my country.
Yes.
But from what I understand, and I had a conversation with Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson today, and he said, the problem is, once the decision is made to go in, once that button gets pushed, it's a very, very difficult decision to reverse.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Of course, because there were people who had warned Bush about going into Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
They said what is going to play out there, and look at where Iraq is today. And I don't think, there's, brother, I pointed out some time ago, there's a specificity, something about the West Europeans,
mm-hmm.
and those who have shaped, the United States, who have held power in the United States, the ruling class, the ruling elites, and so. When you look at their history, it's not one of dialogue. It's about war.
Yes.
And that is why you talk about this clash of civilization.
It's about empire.
That's right. That's right. Other civilizations had what they call civilizational encounter and dialogue and so.
Mm-hmm.
But the West European destroyed, wiped out indigenous peoples' cultures.
Yes.
And subjugated. This is how, and I think when Elijah Muhammad is saying, look, the white man was a devil, he was specific. He really meant, he was talking about the Anglo-Saxon. And you see it, the lies, and they keep repeating lies. And it is sad that we still have, and you have people who, despite this history of lies, people still, there are those who still buy into it.
Mm-hmm.
And you have some left-wingers, some left-wing activists and left-wing organizations, we call them the imperial left.
Yes.
Whose positions actually converge with the false narrative of the empire. And they actually, instead of standing up really to the US empire, mm-hmm. they go after, they would attack Saddam Hussein, they attack Gaddafi, they'll attack Maduro, Castro, everybody. Because this is the left that is who have constructed the world and socialism in their head. And if the reality doesn't mesh up to it, they dismiss it. So, we have
two things here. One is to go along with what you're saying. One is, if Donald Trump were to have called Maduro and said, okay, let's work this out, that means that Donald Trump, first of all, has to deal with Maduro as an equal.
That's right.
And the second thing is, that is an admission that the Chavista revolution was a success.
Yeah.
And those are two things that the imperialist will, that's why Haiti is in the position it is in today. They will not admit that a group of Black people had a successful revolution against the European.
And defeated three powerful European armies.
There we go.
On the back. Yes.
So is that a credible?
Yes, absolutely. I'll tell you, I listened to President Petro, and I listened to what the leaders of the Bolivarian Revolution, and you can see that they're talking about there's tremendous support and solidarity coming from the people of Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of support coming there because they've connected, of course, the dots and so on, the connections to the support that Simon Bolivar got from the revolutionary in Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
When he failed in his attempt twice, he was assisted. He was given ships with printing press, ammunition, and everything, and even some volunteers. And all that was asked of Bolivar was that when you succeed, that you will abolish slavery. And Bolivar was committed to that. But there was a wing, there was a section of those who were fighting the Spanish Empire who wanted to maintain slavery, right, as what the Marxists would call a mode of production.
Right.
But Bolivar opposed it. And this is something today that these backward political and economic elites in Latin America, they were invited many years ago. They had this conference and they were invited to discuss Haiti. America called them. And yet when they got there, the Americans did not show up. And they've always gone along. We see some of these countries going along, their ruling elites going along with the American foreign policy to the detriment of the countries in the Americas.
And yet Europe's doing it right now.
Exactly. But like for example, when Evo Morales was elected president of Bolivia, the first indigenous president of Bolivia, there were opposition figures who wanted to secession. They wanted to take away apart the very mineral-rich area. And they had slogans like, we don't want any indigenous president. And the Americans were backing them. The same way they're backing Machado in Venezuela. Because the Venezuelan revolution has done something that no country in the Americas have done in South America. Mm-hmm. It has moved the indigenous people of Venezuela and African Venezuelans from the margin to the center.
Are those the Cimarron? Is that
yes?
Okay.
Yeah. So if you look in the streets, and you listen to people, you'll see thousands of, years ago, I remember when I go to Caracas, Africans were invisible. Many places you go, you couldn't go in governmental institutions and see them, or even at the airport. As I pointed out, at the airport, you only saw them cleaning their washrooms.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't see that now. When you hit Caracas, you see something different. And I pointed out, I think it was on your program, the present ambassador to Guyana is an African Cuban, and two of the predecessors were women, African women, and then I compare that with Brazil, that has the second largest concentration of Black people after Nigeria. And for all the years, we've had diplomatic relations with them. I've never seen an African Brazilian as ambassador or even a foreign secretary. So in Latin America, in South America, the Americas, what they call Latin America, racist class is, of course, a very powerful dynamic, and so is race. So what you're seeing against Venezuela has its racial dimension.
There's another element to this. Again, I had what I think was just a phenomenal conversation with Colonel Wilkerson today. And I asked him, why do you think Donald Trump is doing this? And he raised a point I had not thought about. He said, there's a move internationally to move the valuation of oil off of the dollar. And that if that were successful, that would just decimate the American economy. So Donald Trump is trying to capture Venezuela because that's the largest, basically untapped oil reserve on the planet. And that if the United States is successful in doing that, then they're able to say to the rest of the world, well, you can do what you want to do because we are now in control of the largest resource of oil on the planet. Your thoughts?
I agree. I'll tell you something. You remember many years ago when they had what was called the oil crisis in OPEC. That was Libya under Gaddafi pushed for higher prices, and they succeeded. And Libya used a lot of that oil money to build infrastructure, carry out social transformation, and so you know. And Rolf Farley, a great third world economist from Guyana, he wrote a monograph called Libya, the Exceptional Third World Economy. 1969, it was one of the poorest. By 1976, they were up and running. So then when you had this oil crisis, and then it started with the Saudis with the using the dollar and so, and then the Americans never forgave Libya for that, because it was Libya that pushed that they claim created this oil crisis. But Libya wanted better prices, and they pushed in OPEC for it. Then you had Saddam Hussein, who decided that he was going to use the euro instead of the US dollar. And they decided that they were going after him for that, right? Because he stopped using the US dollar and was dealing with the euro. Then the issue when Gaddafi, with 150 tons of gold and 165 tons of silver sitting, decided that, look, we're going to create this gold dinar, and that you will have to use it by two when you're trading or doing business with Africa. The French, I know the story because I was there. The French sent a delegation to Libya and actually threatened Gaddafi, said, you cannot do this. And Gaddafi said, I'm not interested in France. This is about Africa. Libya's in Africa. And the rest is history, because that is where the whole thing about the removal of Gaddafi and the overthrow of the Libyan Jamahiriya had to do with that golden dinar and its use in Africa. And the West did not want that. So Trump, now what Trump is doing, because the US dollar, right? You see with BRICS now, I think people are dealing with the yuan.
Right.
And so on. And the US, Trump realized that the United States is in decline. And it is not, when he talk about making America great, whatever's that. When was America ever great? When they carried out genocide against the indigenous people, was the period they were great. So, yes, I agree with that, because Venezuela has not only a tremendous oil and gas reserve, but tremendous mineral.
Yes.
Including gold, a lot of gold, Venezuelan gold. So Trump wants to put his hand in that and what he called the other rare earth. What came out, I saw a report, it appeared in our newspapers, that the UN has accused Venezuela's National Guard of committing crimes against humanity for over a decade. This is the UN and other countries that stood by and standing by as Israel ignores international law,
right?
With the backing of the US and West and European countries. There is no, where is their ceasefire? There's no ceasefire. And they are talking about that. And the National Guard in Venezuela all the National Guard in Venezuela was doing is, of course, it protects that country, territorial integrity and sovereignty. They are there to make sure, like any country in the world, to protect the security, to secure that country institution, to protect the revolution. So people will tell you what are these abuses that you're talking about. I mean, the United States is the last to talk about that. You had in the United States, you had what was called Shays Rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
That uprising, I think it was sometime in 1787 in Massachusetts.
Yes.
Daniel Shay,
yes,
who was a farmer
yes,
who participated in the Revolutionary War.
mm-hmm.
And they said that we did not fight one set of tax oppressor, the tax for another set. And the US government crushed that rebellion. Leaders were executed, hung. And then you had what was called Frey's Rebellion. Frey's Rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
That was in, I think that took place that happened sometime that was 1799. That was another rebellion that was pushed down. The point I'm making is that the National Guard in Venezuela is there to protect the revolution against those who would like to reverse the gains of the revolution. In the same way, the United States bourgeois revolutionaries, those who still had Africans enslaved,
Mm-hmm.
crushed uprisings, put down rebellions. Good. And Lenin addressed that when he wrote State and Revolution. You don't have to be a Marxist or a Leninist to acknowledge that when you overthrow that old order, that old class, you will have to defend the gains of the revolution. You don't allow those who want to reverse the gains to just take up arms against you and you just rule over and die. That does not happen. And the same way the Americans crush Frey's Rebellion and Shays Rebellion and destroy the Black Panthers and what they did to the freedom fighters, to Sata Shakur, to the imprisonment and death of Jamil Al-Amin, formerly Rap Brown. You know, the United States is one of the most repressive states in the world. So they're the last that should lecture anyone on the virtues of democracy and human rights. So that there's a qualitative difference. The Venezuelan National Guard protects a revolution that has given housing, healthcare, education, and people, elderly people, folks, 80, 85, have seen dentists for the first time in their life.
Let me quickly address this issue with María Corina Machado on the stage getting her Nobel Prize. She was late to the event. Exactly. Promoting the overthrow of President Maduro. So in listening to National Public Radio yesterday, and they were talking about, there was all of this concern about where is she? Has she been captured by Nicolas Maduro? She's been in hiding in Venezuela and all of this. And it just made me wonder, well, if Maduro is this incredible dictator, if he is this strong man, if he is running this repressive regime, he must not be very good at it. If she's been able to live in hiding in Venezuela. And the other thing was, in the stories that they kept repeating, they were saying that she was prevented from running for office in Venezuela, but they never said why. Yeah. And the reason is she was convicted of treason. Was it Peru she was backing?
That's right.
She was back. She basically sided with another country against the interests of Venezuela.
That's right.
And so the Venezuelan Supreme Court did what any sovereign court will do.
That's right.
They convicted her of treason.
That's right.
Plain
and simple. That's right. Of course, the intelligence services, the police, they know where she was.
Right.
They were not interested in touching her. Because I think she is just going to phase out. Because as I told you, you look at the hundreds of thousands. The Western media is not showing you that.
Right.
Hundreds of thousands in the street. There's huge rallies. I got messages from activists who are present, and they are saying the same thing. Like when they started this whole lie about Maduro and the elections and all of that, when they had the last set of elections, the opposition was claiming victory long before the actual ballots, they were actually counted the ballots. That's what they do. That is how they operate. They said, look, we are winning. They push that out there and they get people to believe it. And the Western media, corporate media, would push that line. So when Maduro now emerges as the winner, you said, oh, no, you've rigged the elections because the opposition was leading. The opposition was not leading anywhere.
And
leading anywhere.
And let me ask you this, because I equate her in many regards to Alexei Navalny, who used to live in Russia. The United States promoted Navalny as being this incredibly powerful opposition leader in Russia, when he didn't even have 2% support.
That's right.
But the West takes that individual, whether it's Machado in Venezuela or whether it's Navalny in Russia, and who was the guy before her? He's in Florida now.
Yes, that's his name. I'll tell you. That's his name is slipping me now,
right.
But I'll get it.
Anyway, he was another one.
Yeah.
Backed by the United States.
If
left to their own devices,
they
wouldn't even be really known. But the United
Juan
Guaido. Yeah. Juan Guaido was selected by the United States, not elected by the Venezuelans.
Yeah.
Navalny was nothing but a rabble rouser.
That's right.
In fact, when the United States talked about, he was imprisoned by Putin because he was convicted of embezzlement.
That's right.
So, but that part of the story gets left out.
That is left out. Okay. And what is interesting, I mean, the most powerful party in Russia is United Russia, which is President Putin's party. And the second most powerful party in terms of membership and influence in Russia, in the Russian Federation, is the Russian United Communist Party. It's the second most powerful. But they don't talk about that, So here you had, of course, the collapse. You had years ago the collapse of the Eastern Bloc. And we were told by Francis Fukuyama and all those who celebrated the so-called end of history and the triumph of the free market and liberal democracy, that communism is over. But now when you have people like Mamdani being elected and the growing down, you said, we have to go against the communists. So now you saw the leak report. They're going to leak the report to the FBI. Mm-hmm. They're going to all Palestinian, pro-Palestinian activists and people who promote socialist ideas or communists are going to be identified, put under the category of terrorists. So the Wilma Leon, that's something, if that, the price we have to pay for standing up for truth and what is right, morally right, then so be it.
So be it.
Yeah.
It's what it is.
It is. That's right. That's right. We have to carry on from where the ancestors left off.
Final point on Navalny, and then I'll move on. And that is, they said that he was killed with Novichok, which people need to understand. That is, as far as I know, the most lethal antigen known to man.
Yeah.
It's so lethal, it can't really be used.
Yeah.
So they said, oh, it was put in his teacup when he was in the airport. If they had put it in his teacup, everybody in a 15 to 20 foot radius of him would have been dead.
Yes.
Then they said, oh, it was in his water bottle on the airplane.
That's a good point. I recall that. You're right.
That stuff is
Because
so
what
lethal.
you were pointing out was pointed out.
It is so lethal. If it had been in his water bottle on the airplane, everybody on the airplane would have been dead.
Yeah.
So that whole story was
definitely.
Was,
of course, there are a number of people who have covered that story, and they believe, their argument is that the British intelligence, were really and that was really to show Putin as this and that. Yeah.
Right. And final note that people need to, in terms of Marina Machado, there were huge protests in Oslo denouncing her. No peace prize for warmongers. That didn't get a whole lot of national coverage, but there were a whole lot of folks in Oslo that were protesting I won't even say awarding her the peace prize. I'll say they just gave it to her. So I wanted to be sure that we, so with that, I wanted to get your take on what's happening in Benin, and there's a coup, but now the coup was allegedly suppressed, but now the leader of Benin has been trying to get refuge in Togo. What's going on in Benin?
Yeah, well, there was a coup led by a lieutenant colonel who was by the name of Pascal Ligre, and they're claiming that he fled to Togo. Well, of course, the coup was successful in the initial stages. The rebels had gained tremendous ground, but then Nigeria with France intervened, and France started bombing units that supported the coup. This is Nigeria. This is Nigeria that cannot even protect its own territory, right? Because Nigeria, you have Boko Haram has seized huge swaths of territory. They're being backed by certain Gulf states. They're being encouraged by certain by Western powers so that they could break up Nigeria. And Boko Haram is killing Christians and Muslims. And Nigeria, that cannot protect its own people, is going into Benin with France to put down a coup. And this is the president of Nigeria, who was once convicted, who was once involved in drug running. You're aware of that?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And was known. So I guess this is payback for him. But the president, Patrice Talon, this man, he is actually a real surrogate of the French. You know, he is proud. This man admitted, he's proud. He always admit that he's a descendant of Africans who were involved in the trade in captured Africans. So instead of trying to clean that past and to stand up, he is willing to carry on that tradition. Yes, this is the man. So they said that the coup leader is in Togo, but even if he's there, Togo, I don't think Togo is the place he will stay, because Togo is a neo-colonial state. You know, right now there's a circus going on in Togo right now, calling itself the Pan-African Congress going on right there, and many Pan-Africanists have boycotted it because it's just to put like Pan-African credentials on a government that is so repressive. You saw what Togo did to its people a couple months ago or weeks ago, and now you have this Pan-African Congress, and you have some so-called Pan-Africanists, some pseudo-Pan-Africanists from the United States are in Togo. Some other time we'll have to identify some of them, their names, but you will be surprised.
So when we look at a map, and again, I say to my audience all the time that when we start having conversations such as these, I think it's important and incredibly informative to look at a map. So when you look at a map, Benin borders Niger, Benin borders Burkina Faso, two of the states in the alliance of Sahel states. And then, of course, you've got Mali. So does Benin's position relative to Niger and Burkina Faso, does that factor into these dynamics as well?
Oh, definitely, because for years, I think during the time when the Soviet Union was in existence, and you had the Eastern Bloc, there was a party in Benin by the name, I think it was the Workers' Party. It was headed by President Mathieu Kérékou. So there's been a tendency, there's this over the years in Benin. There've been a number of parties and organizations that have always been genuinely committed to the unification of Africa, and under what Kwame Nkrumah said, under socialism. And that tendency has always been strong in Benin. And I think the coup leaders were definitely influenced by what they saw in the Sahel states. And it's like a domino effect. And the French were kicked out of the Sahel states. So the French were saying, well, look, Nigeria, we are going in with Nigeria, prevent this. Because at that coup, if it was successful, of course it would team up, it will link up with the AES states. And that is not what the French want, because the French will lose another neo-colonial outpost had that coup succeeded. And that is why France moved in with the assistance, with Nigeria moved in. Nigeria is just cat's paw for France, and they went in. And France did the bombing of strategic positions, and so to dislodge the rebels.
So
I don't think that's the end of it. I don't think it's going to end there.
That was my next question. Go ahead. So what do you think?
Because I think there was a period, you remember many moons ago we had coups in Africa. We go back to since the days of Jamal Abdel Nasser in Egypt, Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. Then you had people like Thomas Sankara. I'm talking about progressive coups.
Mm-hmm.
Then you had Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso before he was with the French, and the French collaborated with a man who was once close to him to assassinate him. And then you had in Nigeria, you had Murtala Muhammad, who was a military man who carried out a coup, and was under him. Nigeria extended aid to the MPLA. Nigeria took a solid anti-imperialist position, and he was killed. He was assassinated in a Western Baku. And then there was a period when we did not see this. Then you had when they went into all this neoliberal economic structural adjustment policies, programs they imposed in Africa that pauperized Africa more, massive unemployment, the increase in poverty. Because after 35 years of that neoliberal economics, it did nothing. So you're seeing now that coups are back in fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Back in fashion, because so-called liberal democracy, which is a con, and a very contradiction in terms, does not work in Africa. It doesn't work in Africa because once you push that and you push political parties, then you fragment those societies, you divide them along parties and lines, and those parties very often represent various ethnic groups rather than the interests of the people as such.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And that is why the West understand this. And after the collapse of the Eastern Bloc, and so when you had some the one-party states were dissolved, and so the West was mad about this multi-partyism, multi-party democracy, that they had 115 political parties contesting elections against SWAPO in Namibia. And there's a reason for that. You weaken SWAPO's base. And people realize, well, this thing isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
And the military as an institution is prepared. They're taking the role. They're coming forward. And you're seeing it in terms that, you know what is one of the wake factors that have contributed to this? The military in the Sahel states saw what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
They were out there fighting these bogus jihadists, these so-called jihadists, these terrorists who were committing all acts of terrorism in the name of Islam, killing Muslims and Christians. And they saw that the French were not really going after them. They were managing them. They were just managing them. And they woke up to it. And they decided that they were going to kick them out, kick the French out,
Mm-hmm.
close their bases, and also to take control of their strategic resources. Doing in Burkina Faso. That is what Goïta is doing in Mali, and Abdurrahman is doing in Tijani, is doing in Mali.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, in Niger.
In Niger, yeah.
Yeah. So I think you're going to see more coups. You're going to see more coups because the last time we had any coup years back, it was under Jerry Rawlings in Ghana.
More coups going which way? More coups going in the direction of Mali?
More in completing the national liberation struggle, more in the struggle for what Julius Malema and others are calling economic freedom, economic independence. These are not going to be the right-wing coups that you saw that overthrew the Nkrumahs in Ghana, the Modibo Keitas in Mali, and the Sylvanus Olympio dos Pinos. You're not going to see those. These coups are going to be coups aimed at delinking, breaking with neocolonialism, breaking with Western domination, the French control of the economy. That is the direction you're going to see. They're not going to be like the right-wing coups in the early years that got rid of great Pan-African leaders.
Final question then, to that point, then will the United States via Southcom, via AFRICOM, will they interject themselves more directly, or has the success of Chirare and others demonstrated that that's a lost cause?
I'll tell you something. I think it was Kwame Ture who once said, he said that imperialism is going to be buried in Africa. And I did an article around that. And I believe that because Africa is strategic to the world, to the global economy.
Mm-hmm.
I think if the United States gets involved, if AFRICOM is going to get involved, believing that they can prop up neocolonial stooges, you are going to see like what took place in Cameroon, in Togo, as well as in Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
The young generation is very active.
Yes.
My brother, in Ghana,
Yeah.
Ghana, there are many. You have the Socialist Forum.
Mhm.
You have the All African People's Revolutionary Party chapter. There's so many. The Communist Party of Kenya is growing. There are thousands in it. There's an upsurge.
Yes.
Because the people have seen what the structural adjustment program that was imposed on Africa by the World Bank and the IMF has destroyed African economies. And the US military bases are eventually, I will not be surprised in not too long from now that you are going to see people attacking them and marching on them. You're going to see that. The other thing is
the article you wrote?
Yeah.
Please email me the article that you wrote, please.
Yes, I'll send it to you. Yes.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Yep. So that is happening, and there's a tendency now growing across Africa. If you know, Julius Malema established the Economic Freedom Fighters, and there's the Economic Freedom Fighters in Namibia. There are Economic Freedom Fighters in Nigeria, Economic Freedom Fighters in Ghana. There's Economic Freedom Fighters in Malawi. There's Economic Freedom Fighters in Zimbabwe. So it's spreading. It is spreading because what they're saying is what we are saying here, that independence that these many African countries got was just a flag and anthem independence. France, those countries, the French-speaking countries, were never really dependent. They were controlled by France, and yet you had one in the country, you had such a brilliant mind like Leopold Sédar Senghor, who allowed the French to remain in Senegal. You look at what that man wrote and then his practice. It was such a contradiction. It's like Eric Williams in the Caribbean who wrote Capitalism and Slavery. But when faced with the Black Power rebellion in the 70s, he took assistance from the United States to put it down. Yeah. So there we go.
Brother Gerald Perreira, man, thank you again.
Yes. Welcome, brother, anytime.
Really, really appreciate it. Please send me that article.
I will.
Because once I read it, then I'll bring you back and we can talk about it in the current context.
Yes, definitely.
All right?
Yes.
My man. Thank you, really.
Special salute. Keep up the good work. As I always tell you, you're doing God's work.
Thank you, sir. My brother. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, folks. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We need your support. Desperately need your support. I've been reluctant to say this, but I don't want y'all to say, well, Wilmer, why didn't you tell us? We need about between $5,000 and $6,000 a month to run this show, and we've reached a point with the show that we're going to have to end the show, because for all intents and purposes, we've run out of money. So if we can do this by the end of the month, then we'll be able to continue. But we've reached a point now where some hard decisions have had to be made, and it is, as they said in The Irishman, it's what it is. So with that, Brother Ajamu Baraka is going to join us tomorrow. New show tomorrow. Brother Ajamu Baraka is going to join us tomorrow. And with that said, remember that this is where the analysis of politics, history, and culture converge, because talk without analysis is just chatter. And we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. With that, have a blessed remainder of your day. I'll see y'all tomorrow with Ajamu Baraka. With that said, peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.